Good afternoon to all our participants. Today, we have come together for this month's edition of MRSI's Wednesday webinar. The topic today is Behavioral Science, a lens for understanding consumer behavior. Michaela, if you can hit the next slide, please. As you all know, we are on season 5, and we meet every month on a Wednesday in the afternoon, and we are doing that again. So welcome all, welcome again. Next slide, please. The session host today will be I, Sundar Muthuraman, and Mukul Gautam. We will run you through the session for the next hour or so. Samir, who is our other host and webinar committee member, will not be joining us today. Quickly, a little bit about the MRSI. Established in 1998, MRSI is a unique, not-for-profit association of providers and buyers of research and insights. MRSI's objectives are to create awareness of the industry among public at large, as well as the government. We also help and drive professional standards and establish standards. We also provide a platform for professionals to engage and showcase their work and collaborate on common issues, like we are doing today with the Wednesday webinar, which is a flagship program to bring the best out there in terms of the changing face of MR and new things that we as a community need to adopt and take forward. Michaela, next slide, please. Mukul, over to you. We have exciting pair of panelists, and they are together on the screen. And again, this is the first time in the Wednesday webinar where we have two panelists in a video window. So with that, Mukul, I hand them over to you, and I'll take myself off the screen.
Yes, thank you so much, Sundar. Okay, so everybody, we've got Prakash and Reshma. Prakash and Reshma together run 1001 Stories. Prakash is a user consumer insights and interventions consulting person. Reshma does a lot of work which is driven by social norms, social psychology, behavioral sciences. 1001 Stories applies principles of context architecture, and behavioral science to analyze, understand, influence human behavior to create better products, brands, people. They work with various brands which you can also see on your screen, like Flipkart, Myntra, HDFC, Scaler, Swiggy, Counting Well, Willgo, Samsung, Mondelez, etc. Personally, I'm actually quite excited to have both of them, and we've been discussing to actually get speakers in this Wednesday webinar and focus on a lot of adjacencies. And behavioral science is something that we all sort of keep on discussing. There are some conversations that keep on happening, but it is a good today is a good day where we've actually had them, and they'll sort of shed light on how behavioral science and research, as we sort of talk about it, know about it, how they sort of align. There are a lot of questions I'm very sure that everybody has. So yes, I'll not take a lot of your time, guys. Prakash, Reshma, completely over to you.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, Prakash and Mukul. I keep doing this. I forget some housekeeping announcements. So participants who are joining us first time in the webinar, you cannot interact via audio with us. You have to use the questions panel in the menu that you have in the GoToWebinar. Please type in your questions at an appropriate time later in the session. We will bring up these questions to the panelists. And please do type them as they come so you don't forget them. And in case we're not able to answer all the questions, the panelists will answer it, and we will share it on our website, and you can access that. With that, Prakash, sorry for the interruption. Back to you.
Prakash, I think you're muted here. You'll have to just unmute yourself and then go. Yeah. Still muted. Just give us 1 sec.
Mute.
Now it's on.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
All right. All right, perfect. Let me see if I can get the screen back on now. All right, perfect. The screen is here too. Thank you so much. What is a webinar if there aren't one
Can
or
you
two
hear me?
technical glitches? Can you hear me now? Can you see the screen? Not the screen, that screen, right? So I think if that has happened, I think we're off to a good start, Ray. Dear all who have joined us from different corners of the country, welcome to this particular session. I'm Prakash. With me is
Reshma.
and we run 1001 stories together, and we'll try to have a good time together. I think that's the plan, right? More or less.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah. There are no jargons.
There are no jargons.
There are no jargons.
Okay. Do we have the right slides on then? Okay. Okay. There are no jargons. Fine. All right. How do we start this? Let's go back. Let's talk about something very, very real. Everything has been said, and we have come too late. Now that men have been living and thinking for 7,000 years or more. So essentially, from this point of view, everybody knows everything, right? This is the first thing that we're very aware of right now. All of us here are very smart people, intelligent people, and more or less, I think we know. We know more or less, right? Second thing we're very aware of this is this fantastic curve. It's called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And this curve, more or less, it says, you're going to hear a lot of more or less from it today, I think. It says, memory decay, you start forgetting as soon as you start learning, which means, unfortunately, we are very, very aware that there's a good probability you'll forget almost 80-90% of whatever we were talking about today in just 30 days from now.
In fact, what was the previous slide in itself may already have been forgotten.
So that puts some kind of a pressure on us to make sure we do justice to your time. And it might also help if you make a conscious decision saying, you know what, I'll skip this, I'll skip this, I'll skip this, but this makes sense to me. So let me make a note.
Or let me take 3 things out of this entire session.
3 things? All right, that's a high one. All right, let's go. So 13.8 billion years ago, Big Bang, all right. 4.5 billion years ago, life appears now. And then 500,000 years ago, the brain makes its debut, right? 4 billion years, we were without a brain. I mean, not we.
Life.
So the brain is very interesting. It's an important organ. We all know that. What's really interesting is there are some species which actually develop, which are born with a brain. And at some point of time in his journey, they decide, I don't need this because it's consuming too much energy.
In fact, the brain is exactly what is detrimental to life and to survival.
For this particular species.
So what I will really do is that I'm going to eat my brain.
Fantastic. And so then it eats his brain, it attaches itself to a rock, and then it decides this is life now. Very interesting. Eh? So if you look at the brain, it has got 2 tasks. The first is an internal task. It's going to regulate, the central nervous system and all of that. The strategy is very simple. Do whatever is needed
to survive.
And that means lying to you. Your brain can lie to you because it knows you would not take the right action, which is why it makes you feel thirsty. It makes you feel like you're dying of thirst or dying of hunger, even though physiologically the body is fine, but it creates a signal so that you drink the water right now.
But even though you drink the water, I mean, it should take up to 20 minutes for your body to actually feel the effects of the new water that you have added. But as soon as you drink the water, you feel satiated. And that is also the brain lying to you, saying, okay, I got what I needed. Now enough is enough.
Right.
So are we really conscious of what we are doing, why we're doing what we're doing?
Which brings us to the second task, which is external, right? And it needs us to develop strategy, and the strategy is quite simple. Learn to see better. In fact, we have become so good at this. Each one of you out here more or less knows all of these images. This particular one.
Please type in the chat box if you remember these images, or you remember that you've seen them somewhere. Please type also if you don't remember where you've never seen these images. That will be very interesting.
The second strategy for your brain is to learn how to handle too much information. Your brain is lazy. It doesn't like to think too much. It doesn't like to consume too much energy, right? But the reality of life is there's just too much information all around us all the time. And your brain has to devise a strategy to handle this information overload. So the primal brain has got essentially two functions. Quickly make a decision. Is it this thing in front of me, is it a friend, a foe, or should I ignore this thing? Second is this particular area that I'm in. Is it safe or unsafe? Essentially, they're the same.
They're the same thing.
Is it safe or is it unsafe? And that is our core OS, even though it's what, some 200, 300,000 years for evolution, and we are now sitting on a webinar. Right? That's us, at the core of it, right? That is how we behave, driven by our primal brain. And that is where we come in as a team. We analyze, understand, and influence human behavior so that we can create a better product, a better brand, better people. That's us as 1001 stories, right? And at this point of time, we have been working for close to 7 years. Here are some findings. Everyone has answers. Everyone in the world literally has an answer, including the pawn shop wala. You can go and ask him, what do I do about a particular country, let's say China or Russia? And he might just come back with an answer saying, stop doing business with them. And he may scoff at it, but that's exactly what the UN is doing right now, or not necessarily UN, the global powers when it comes to Russia by sanctions.
And
right?
one of the reasons for this, one of the reasons that everyone has an answer is because everyone has expert experience in being a human.
So in this world where everyone has answers, the challenge is asking the right question. You know this. This is a part of your job already. Second thing that we found out is everything is contextual. Again, no surprises there. Crooked Stevie, he is willing to kill someone just because he was stuck in traffic for 15 seconds, right? He's okay with people getting killed. He's not a bad guy. I'm sure Crooked Stevie, D Waits 117, I'm sure he's a nice person, a good son, a good boyfriend, husband, probably a decent dad, a good colleague.
And good to strangers also.
More or less. But if you give him the right context, he's okay with people getting killed. He gets murderers. Everything is contextual. Again, no surprises there.
In one of our researches, for example, when you ask people if you had 10,000 in the bank and you spent 1,000 rupees, it's close to the end of the month. What is that going to do to your saving behavior? What is that? How are you going to handle the budget the rest of the month? And the way that people look at spending 1,000 rupees when they have 11,000 and spending 1,000 rupees when they have 10,000, and what that does to understanding the remaining money and what is the impact of that on the way that they will budget the rest of the month completely changes. The panic changes, everything changes. We don't actually understand it as the same 1,000.
The third thing is the answer are where the people are. Again, you know this. The answers can't be found in AC rooms. You have to go down to that fish market. You have to go down to that cloud kitchen. You have to go down, over there, watch people, ethnography, right? The best way of finding answers. You know this too. But this is the part which we hope to be able to impart to you in a very concise, hopefully useful manner, right? Which is the basics of behavioral science and context. And the basics are this: there is too much information in the world, number one. There's too less time or mental space available to each one of us, right? Which means you cannot actually process all of this information. And on that, you have this need to take a quick action. What do I do with this data? Do I, process it, inform it? Do I take an action? I must take an action quickly. And there is a fourth challenge. Do I need to remember this? Do I need to create some sort of a meaning to make sure that it's imprinted on my neurons for me to remember this, right?
What is the narrative that I can give to this action, to this incident, or to this stimulus to make sure that the next time I encounter it, I understand exactly what it is?
And that's your basics of behavioral science. Now, trying to understand human behavior, psychology is not something which started yesterday, right? The Oracle at Delphi, right, who are famous for their predictions. What they're doing is cold reading. They're very high on empathy, I'm assuming. Are they really seeing in the future, or is just high, super focused empathy and human behavior is understanding?
It's definitely coming from empathy. It's coming from the experience of being human, the experience of empathizing with conditions, people, knowledge, information in front of you, and being able to forecast.
If you look at this, right, the story of what's his name, Ulysses? I'm pronouncing it right, Ulysses, right? Lovely story, Ulysses and the Sirens. You go mad when you listen to this singing, to them sing their songs. But they're supposed to be fantastic singers, and it's difficult to resist them. But you get driven to madness. So what Ulysses does is he asks his crew to put, I think, wax in their ears, yeah.
I think it's wax. I'm not sure.
Wax, yeah, and he asked them to tie him, to this mast, so that he listens to them sing because he's curious, but it's not doing something stupid when he's driven to madness, right? He understands his future behavior is something which he can't control. So he's taking action in the present to prevent himself from doing that. Fun fact, this is what is called the Ulysses Contract in the behavioral science world, where you understand that you may not actually keep up your end of the bargain in the future because the future self is a different person. Future you is not the same as you right now, right? The future you wants to be healthy. You would rather eat chocolate. Ulysses knew that. Ulysses Contract. This was something which Ogilvy spoke about, and I'm sure everybody out here knows this line more or less. Consumers don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And therein lies this interesting question, right? In every millennia, in every century, in every decade, we've tried to understand human behavior, and at this point of time, behavioral science has found a way to give us answers closely. Would that be a right way to say it? Right?
I think one way to say it is that what we do when we are really measuring human behavior, and by measuring I mean researching or finding or asking questions or being able to look at our data so that we can analyze and make behavior predictable. What we're doing is that in a lot of cases we are measuring what are people thinking. What behavioral science tries to really do is that it tries to look at what people are doing, and it separates the two and says, I'm not worried about what they're thinking, I'm only concerned with how they're behaving.
Which brings us to market research, and we're just trying to do this random Google search auto suggestion to see, like, how does Google think about, like, what are the most important questions people have been asking us. Market research is needed for done to target blah blah blah, like what exactly it is it important for starting a business? Fantastic. So because we're trying to find how do we bring behavioral science into the world of market research, let's start with what behavioral science is, right? It studies what people do, or a better articulation is it studies what stimulates people to do what they do. Now this word, right, irrational, it gets thrown around a lot as if it is a
it's the new sudden buzzword also, the fact that people are irrational, and let's look at what irrationality, what are they doing when they're taking decisions without actually thinking about it. But if you think about it, eating that chocolate when you're on a diet, which is supposedly irrational behavior, is standard human behavior, is the default behavior. Why? Because that is the way that your brain has been designed. It's the way it's been programmed. It says, if there is a possibility that you can gain sugar in food right now, then take it. Right?
It's good for you.
It's good for you. If it's pleasurable, even more, take it now. You don't know what animal in the wild is going to take that from you. You don't know if there's someone stronger who's going to take that away from you, and you're going to have to wrestle for it. Granted, this is the brain has evolved from a time when you were a caveman, but it's the same brain you have, and you can't really help it. So irrational behavior is the only rational behavior. When you sit down to rationalize, explain, justify what you do and why you do it, that is when you're really being irrational. That behavior is really what is out of sync with who you really are, and that is not common.
Which brings us to how do we bring in a flavor of behavioral science to market research, right? As 1001 Stories, there are two things that we do primarily. Number one is insight generation, understanding why people do what they're doing. Second part is intervention. How do you translate these insights into a change for the company's product, the brand, or its people processes, right? So one part of it is actually around understanding people's behavior. And we were able to map out a process of sorts to make sure that we have a way of making Ogilvy's quote actionable, right? The first of it is the three filters. Ray, you want to quickly tell the three filters?
Yes, absolutely. So Garrett Hardin speaks about this, where he talks about filters against folly, which is essentially the fact that when we listen to people talk, when we listen to people communicate, live through their daily lives, we believe whatever it is that we see. But the fact is that the way that you say things, the way that you explain what you're doing, the way you understand numbers, and the way that you understand what happens because of a consequence of whatever you do, we don't necessarily have these filters, and we don't necessarily process it the same way. It is not universal. What do words really mean when we say them? What is the hidden meaning? What is the if you look at the whole genre of linguistics, if you look at the whole science of linguistics and look at what does a word actually mean? And culturally, in a country like India, these different words mean different things depending on what language you're talking in, depending on the age of the person that you're speaking to, and depending on the age of the person asking the questions. The way that we formulate these concepts in our minds as we respond changes depending on who we are speaking to and what we are really saying in the words that we use. Understanding what do these words mean really, if we train your lens there, you get completely new insights. Numeracy. Do we actually understand math? Do we actually understand numbers? Let's go one step deeper. It's very common when you speak to, I'm sure that you must have also gone through this. If you ask respondents, for instance, how many children in your class, how many children in your child's class attend tuitions? They'll say, 60% of them, depending on whether their child attends tuitions or not. If their child does not attend tuitions, there is a high probability that they will say, 40% do. And if their children attend tuitions, then they may say 60% do. But then when you ask them a little later, allow them to go through the forgetting curve, and then ask them again, how many children in your child's class go through tuitions? And how many children are there in your child's class? Chances they'll say, 40 children are there in my child's class, and I think 10 of them take tuitions. 10.
Yeah. We're not good in numbers, are we?
We're not good with numbers.
We
don't understand what they really mean. No.
We don't understand ratios, proportions.
In fact, there is research that says that beyond the number 7, in fact, in some researchers, it says 6. Beyond the number 6 or beyond the number 7, we don't actually understand the meaning of the rest of the numbers. We don't know what that means.
In fact, if you look at the way you got numbers, right? In most languages, you don't really have numbers.
19.
Yeah, more or less. All right. A third of it is, so you got literacy and numeracy. The third filter of how we understand the world, right? EC is equilacy, and equilacy is this layer of brains thinking where you can understand and then what happens. For example, go ahead.
Yeah, I gave 1,000 rupees for charity, and I feel great about it. What happened to that money? Where did it go? Where was it spent? We don't know, and we don't think about it. And then what happened? We don't know.
So if you're going to ask someone, assume you have started saving in a mutual fund, right? And 5 years from now, you have been able to save a good amount of money. How will you go and spend that money, or what does it mean for you, right? The challenge in most of us is by default, we are not able to imagine or articulate that. Because, and then what is a difficult answer for the brain to give us in general, which is also, I don't have any savings at this point of time. All right. Something beautiful about Ludwig Wittgenstein, he says the limits of my language are the limits of my mind. Now, why are we talking about Ludwig Wittgenstein? The reason is this previous slide. We are trying to understand people. That's what we do when you do research, right? Now, if you want to understand people, you want to understand how people understand the world around them. They understand it through the literate filter, the numerate filter, the accurate filter, which brings us to Ludwig Wittgenstein. Ray, you want to take this
Absolutely.
up?
So Ludwig Wittgenstein is one of the most fantastic language philosophers who existed, and he spoke about how if you look at semiotics and if you look at language itself, what he says is that words are essentially sound images. So if I say the word chair, immediately in your minds there are images of chairs that pop up. Chances are none of us are seeing the same chair. None of us are seeing the chair in the same setting. None of us are seeing the same height. Some of us may be seeing someone sitting on it, someone using it. It may be in front of us. It may be far away from us. Even the distance of the way that you see the chair is different, depending on your context and depending on who is the person asking you this question, depending on what I have triggered in you. All of these are triggers. These are mental associations built from memory, built from context, built from what is the meaning I have given to the question itself that has been asked.
What is very, very interesting is depending on your vocabulary or your power to articulate things, your understanding, your processing of the world changes.
I want to give a very quick example here. It'll, instead of talking in the abstract, it makes it just easier. A very simple example is something that happened when once we were researching segregation of waste in a particular ward in the city. And an interesting thing that turned up was that everybody, we are in Bangalore, and in Bangalore, most people speak about the fact that there is a landfill issue, the fact that there is a lot of waste on the roads, and this is a very big problem. Everyone seems to understand it. When you speak about waste segregation, everyone talks about the fact that it is something that is important. We need to reduce the amount of waste in the landfills, etc., etc. The common knowledge is there. Why are we not seeing then that change in behavior? There are many intuitive ways of answering this question. But interestingly, we realized that waste in itself had a particular time of day, and waste in particular had a different context at a different point in time, and that was about 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning. And when you went and spoke to people at the time of the day when the maids had come in, when they were cleaning the house, when they were disposing of the waste out there, and when you spoke to them at that point in time and spoke to them about the garbage again, the words suddenly changed, and the way that they spoke about it suddenly was different. No longer was the conversation about garbage and waste. Suddenly the conversation became about cleanliness and about hygiene. And we realized as we were continuing these conversations that these are two completely different concepts and they do not have anything to do with each other. And the association of cleanliness in this country also has nothing to do with hygiene and nothing to do with germs and nothing to do with health. What it really has to do is with purity and with the social role of the woman of the house. The fact that she woke up in the morning and she took a bath and the kitchen was cleaned and the house was cleaned. It was a new day. It was sacred. And garbage, the ritual of taking the garbage out of the house meant that there was a certain cleanliness in the house. At that point in time, when the conversation came about segregation, suddenly they spoke about the fact that they could not have two garbage bins in their house because it meant collecting more waste. And these thoughts were making them very, very uncomfortable. Suddenly the words change, the language changes, because in that context, what those things mean becomes different.
It becomes important for us to be able to understand what are the words being used, what are the words saying, and equally important, like Ray says, what are they not saying? Enough research says language affects our memory, our perception of reality. In fact, there is research which points that language which allows you to better connect to your future self can actually help you save more money. It can lead to better saving rates or health behavior.
Languages that had a more association with the future tense or more association with living in the future, which meant that you were able to imagine your future sense. There are languages that allow for that. The grammar structure allows for that. These countries, the people just readily saved more. So interesting.
Another interesting thing is, like in this particular case, which one would you buy? Feel free to just put up any of the answers out there in the chat box. I'm not sure if you can type it. It will be lovely to see your answer. Indulge us, please. Right? Which one would you buy?
If small is A and large is B, which one would you choose?
Small and large too?
Yeah, you can type small and large. Why not?
All right. All right.
No one wants popcorn.
No one wants popcorn. It's lunchtime. They must have had biryani, I'm sure.
Okay.
No, I can actually see a lot of responses. So there's a lot of large, small, large, small, large. A lot of people saying large.
Fantastic. That's very, very
we can
interesting.
see. Acha.
I think it must be the hunger time.
Haan,
I'm
maybe.
assuming like 80% of them are hungry right now, right? Normally, when you put up something like this, right, the answers are equally split between a small and a large. The normal context being, let's say, a theater where they're going to watch maybe Kantara or maybe the upcoming Pathan, whichever is your favorite movie, or RRR. And normally you would expect, because statistics, people do behave 50-50%. This is where it gets interesting. The moment you introduce a decoy option, we call it decoy option, right? You introduce a medium option. And now when you ask people, which one would you rather buy? What
Which
would you
one
buy,
would you
folks,
choose?
now?
Mukul, you'll have to help us because we can't see the.
Yes. No, I'm just waiting for people to just type in.
Aha.
Yes. I think yes. So there's large again, medium. Yes,
Mhm.
we've got a first medium. People still, like, some people also selected small. Some
That's very,
said,
very.
one person said
What
it's a
happens
trick.
is,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mukul, and everybody who joined in. What happens in the wild is uh, introducing this decoy option, which essentially is when you change the context, the way people process information changes. Suddenly, this small is no longer appealing. Neither is the medium. You know why? Because in this case, you don't know what to compare with what. But here, you realize that the large and the medium are more or less proximate to each other. And from a value point of view, the 50 cents extra, right, makes the large a better option. Funnily, this also means your brain asks you to buy a large even over the small. And in general, people are much more likely in this case to buy the large. All right. Why did we talk about that? We'll come to that in a moment right now. The questions, right? Questions of this nature. We've touched this. We are very poor with processing numbers. In fact, if you look at the Pira folks which are in the jungle, they barely
don't
have
numbers.
they don't have numbers.
They have a very simplistic language. They don't really have numbers. They just have small, somewhat larger, and many. Interestingly, does this mean that they don't understand or they don't get it? No, not really. Very quickly, if I were to put it, research has also shown that cultures that don't really measure in terms of mathematic matrix, in terms of numbers of this sort, they develop a beautiful sense, with a tactile sense, which means that when they see something, they're able to feel the weight of things much better, and that becomes one tool to be able to measure. But to be able to measure, you always first need a reference point. What do I compare this thing to? That's the starting point. What limits am I setting to be able to measure?
What this means for us is, it'd be lovely to just do ethnography all the time and watch human behavior in the actual environment, right? In reaction to the actual context around us. However, we may not have the luxury to us while you're trying to understand what people are doing our research, right? And we have now understood people interpret the world through those three filters: the literate, numerate, and accolade. And now we know it becomes important for you to create the context. Your context, one way to create them is with social norms or language, like we spoke about. Trigger states, we'll talk about that collective memory of call the error. We would love to talk about them in detail.
But this goes into context architecture. Let's
So let me
stick
just
with behavior.
bring you a very quick example, like in a minute's time, on how you can use money to better understand people's motivation while doing research. You want to take the example here?
Absolutely. So we were talking about non-conscious behavior really, and this is one of those examples, right? Research has shown that there are particular symbols, and the way that these symbols act on us non-consciously is humongous, right? One of the examples, one of the experiments that Adam Adler and his team had run is that they took three different sample sizes and they took three different groups, three different test groups. And essentially what they did is that it was a very simple experiment. It was just, something to the effect of dots and fill the lines without moving the pencil. It was just something that could, cognitively be very involving for a short amount of time, and that's really what they wanted. They wanted their respondents to do for some time, but that was not the actual experiment. But the actual experiment was for the first group. They called in the respondents and they gave them a sheet of paper and they said, go back, sit down on the seats, and do this experiment, just fill the dots and all of that stuff. Now, when they finished, as soon as they finished their papers, they asked them to come back to the desks and hand it back. When they handed the paper back, the researcher would open this, kitty of money, because they have to pay them for being part of this. It was just about $2. It was a small amount, but they said, would you like me to give you this $2, which is which is something that is part of this a reward for this, an incentive for this research? Should I give it to you, or would you like me to put this into a charity? And interestingly, more than 70% of the people said, go ahead and just put it into charity. That's perfectly fine. And they'd go. For the second group, the same experiment, this time when the people came and they were about to take their money, when they were about to give the paper, the researcher gave them the money. So he had it in his hand and he took the paper and he said, by the way, would you like for us to put some of this money into, charity? Would you like that? And then the people, again, I'm not very sure about the numbers, but it is definitely more than 40-45% of the people said, we will donate up to 50 to 60 cents.
More or less.
More or less.
Let's use it more or less.
More or less.
Yeah.
More or less about 60 cents is what we are willing to give. In the third group, when the people were sitting down and doing their experiments, the researchers walked around the room and they placed the $2 on the table. So the money was in front of them as they were doing their research, as they were finishing the experiment. And when they were leaving, they said, by the way, would you like any of this money to go into research? And apparently, only 12% of the people actually came back. And the amount that they were willing to give was less than 20 cents.
That's crazy, because more or less people are good. But it is just the presence of money. Can you see it? Can you not see it? And if you can see it, is it near you? Is it in your hand? And if it's in your hand, was it given to you before or after?
What that also means is that when you're testing for, and money is not the only symbol.
This is one example. How can you create that context when you're trying to understand people's behavior?
What sort of non-conscious, what of stimulus can you give that is going to trigger non-conscious responses to how people will behave in the wild?
Should you cue in a particular kind of smell? Would a certain kind of music change the answer they're giving to you?
A very interesting stimulus is the national flag. Of whichever country. Whenever there is research to do with the sense of belonging or anything that can make you slightly angry, apparently just a stimulus, just the picture of your flag can lead to different responses to a DG versus a group that is not shown any of stimulus like money or flags or symbols that have to talk about belonging or pride or any of these things.
So an important part of conducting research from a behavioral science lens is realizing that you have to create the right context carefully, because the context changes our responses in a non-conscious way. And then you want to use the layer of the numerate filter, the literate filter, and the accurate filter to understand, did people really understand what you're trying to ask them? Number one. And number two, this is equally important, that you as a researcher actually understand what they're trying to tell you back. Because more often than not, we are very, very guilty of our own biases. How can I be wrong? Can I be wrong? Of course not. Which brings us to the second part of it. What is the second tool you can use? It's behavioral segmentation. Put simply, again, if you go back to Ludwig-Wittgenstein, once you have the words, the vocab for it, once you know what you're seeking for, it's easy to find it, right? So if you look at it from a behavioral lens and you want to find a sharp insight, you realize more or less, you have 5 possible states of a behavior. I'll never do this. I'll always do this. I do this sometimes. And then you have the interesting one. I just started and I just stopped. And the question is, if you start looking at your population, your sample from this lens, you can start asking yourself question. What
you can
particular
start building personas on the basis of this behavioral segmentation.
And you can ask yourself this question, Allow me a moment,
Sure,
and
sure, sure.
I'll see
Please,
the
please,
control
please.
back to you, right? What biases keeps a particular behavior cohort from jumping to the next frequency? If someone says, I just started it, what was the trigger? If someone says, I do it sometimes and sometimes I don't, what kind of barriers exist? And we're talking about psychological barriers in this particular case, right? So if you look at your sample, 1 minute more, right? If you look at your sample from this particular lens, you would be able to craft insights and answers which are slightly sharper. Okay, let me not use the word slightly sharper. That's a wrong phrase. Which actually answer this behavioral question, which might help your client devise interventions which are likely to bring in a good ROI. And
What I wanted to
do
add
you want
to
me to
this
back
is
the previous slide on
no,
this?
that's fine.
All right.
I think it's about also what is the behavior we're talking about. The behavior is not, do I choose your brand or do I not choose the brand? Am I using competition sometimes? Am I using because these are rational choices. We're talking about irrational choices, which are, for example, and this is just one sort of example, is the behavior that I go to a store and I look at three choices, or I look at 2 3 different choices, and then I pick um, this brand all the time. I look at 4 coffees and then I pick up X coffee. I do this never. I just do this sometimes. I just started doing this because I'm not happy with the previous brand that I was using, but I never do this. The moment we start looking at that, you might suddenly start seeing that a new sorts of insights start coming in. Something that we've realized, that there is a possibility that in some categories, the people who look at different brands and then choose the same brand again and again, they're essentially self-herding. They're following they're following themselves. They're following their own previous behavior each time. These people may be more are better for your brand than the people who always choose you, because there's a chance that they always choose you and then they say, now I'm done, I want to try something else, simply because I'm feeling a sense of FOMO.
Fantastic. Now this framework we borrowed from Matt Waller. It's him. Credit goes to him to be able to create this beautiful way of segmenting people. Now, when you are doing this segmentation, right, you want to guide yourself because you are trying to find out why is someone jumping from one particular code to the other. Here are your very basic, simple guide as you start bringing in behavioral science into market research. Always know that users in general, again, more or less, they overvalue what they already have. It's called the endowment bias. If I have something, it must be good. I love it, right? Which is why you want to sell your house at a particularly higher price compared to what the market is, willing to offer for it. It's yours. It has to be good, right? We overvalue what we have. We love free stuff. BOGO, buy one get one. It makes sense, right? एक के साथ free. It makes sense, but there's a caveat. Just because we love free does not mean, and one of our clients actually found this the hard way, and they're very curious and they ask, which of people love free stuff? Why is this backfiring? People will not value what you give them for free unless they realize the cost of the free stuff. Third basic principle is users in general hate losing what they already have. They hate a loss, right? Rather than gaining something, they're more motivated by the fear of losing something.
And losing what they already have, not losing what you're offering.
Yeah. They're influenced by social proof. I'm much more likely to do something if I see Reshma and Rajiv and 6 more people at my team do it. Of course, I'm going to be doing it. The last of it, this is not the exhaustive list, but there's a good set of principles to begin incorporating behavioral science lens. Users go with the default option. Now, that brings us to the third lens. We'll take a minute more and then we can start our Q&A sessions, right? If you have questions. The third is to understand what triggers a behavior. Why do we do something, right? As a lovely model by Professor B.J. Fogg from Stanford, and he says behavior is a function of motivation, ability, and prompt. That is, B is equal to MAP, and all three of them must converge together for a certain behavior to come true. Which means you cannot motivate yourself into losing weight. Nahi hone wala, bro. You cannot motivate yourself into becoming rich. Now, people who say motivation solves everything, not gonna happen, right? People say discipline solves everything, not gonna happen. People say, if I tell my friend and I'll talk to him, he will understand. Not going to happen. You need all three of them coming together. So when you're trying to understand the behavior of a sample, of your cohort, right? Try to understand what is the motivation map. Is it very low?
Beyond barriers and triggers, what are the motivations, the prompts, and what is the ability in the context, what is the ability of this person given the context to actually find the motivation and respond to the prompt.
Right. So if your motivation is very high, you're much more likely to do something. If it's low, you'll not do it. If it's easy for you to do something, you'll do it. If it's not easy, you'll not do it, right? That's where prompts come into play, right? If something is easy for you, a simple message. For example, if I need to go out to the gym or go out running, right? If it's easy for me, Ray dropping me a text is enough. Are you going run today? That message is going to make me go out for a run. But if I'm typically feeling lazy and I don't want to do it, the prompt has to become very strong, which means maybe she comes down to my house and give me a ring and says, dude, do you want to go out for a jog in the park? And now the prompt becomes important, right? So you want to understand motivation, ability, and prompt, all of them together. And this is how we solve problem 1001 stories by looking at human behavior, understanding why people do what they do. There's a second part to it, which is now that you have understood their behavior, how do you actually go around creating interventions? Like
how do you influence it?
How do you influence the human behavior out there? And we typically create an intervention at the product level, at the brand level, or at a people level. In fact, for one of our recent case, the one we talked about, the power of free, where the client was confused, we were able to bring in a change, and almost I think 55% was the last jump, customer engagement. So that's what we're able to do. Now, as we end this particular session, we go back to what we said in the beginning. Everything has been said. We know everything. So why go through this? And the answer is because nobody listens, and we keep on forgetting. Everyone, each one of us, including me and Ray and Mukul, we are going to keep on forgetting, which is why we need to keep on going back to our basics again and again. Things are not what they are. Things are what we think they are, and things are what we compare them to. And with this, we want to say thank you. And Mukul, back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Prakash. Thank you, Reshma. We do have a few questions, and we do have some like 5 minutes, so we can just quickly take some of them. So one of the questions I think Sajal has actually asked it, coming from a jobs to be done perspective, would motivation be high if a situation in which the urge to hire a solution to get a particular job done exists? I think people are really. It says that coming from a jobs to be done perspective, which is again functional, emotional, social motivation to do things, would motivation be high if the situation in which the urge to hire a solution to get whatever we're trying to get done exists?
Yes.
That doesn't do anything for ability though.
Okay. There's also another thing that people ask, that how about people go walk in a park in a car, so they have motivation to walk, but they're making a task a little easy. Is that an observation? So I think what people are really doing is that they're actually really picking things from what you've said. So because in fact one of the things that people were pointing out was then when we were talking about the effect of money. Is it the same thing that is happening to UPI payments? Are you spending more because you're not able to physically see the money?
Fun fact, we did a good amount of experiment and we realized that the answer is yes. Removing money, there's something
and the
called
level
the pain
to
of
which
payment.
yes, it is very, very high.
Not being able to see money go out of your hand or your wallet tangibly actually makes you spend more. So behaviorally, if you want to control the spending, maybe you start dealing with cash.
We are living in an age of the illusion of surplus.
Yeah.
Because you don't see money leaving, we tend to believe that we never actually register the loss of the money. So we genuinely believe that utna hi hai wapas bank mein. We don't actually realize that it's not there.
Any other questions, Mukul?
I'll just add one from my side. Sundar, you can also jump in case you do. You're muted, I think, Sundar.
Yeah, after you, I said. Go on.
Okay. No, I think one of the things that we keep on debating, Prakash, I'm an out and out qualitative researcher. We keep on debating. We see a lot of behavioral sciences and a lot of behavioral science work and a lot of talk around it. And on the floor, it keeps on happening that, okay, what is how is it different from qualitative research? Right, then how is it different from ethnographic research? Because it seems like the focus seems to be on all the disciplines on similar things, But in terms of actionability or an end outcome, are they really things which sort of depend on each other, or are they things where the outcomes could actually be very different?
It'll depend case to case. In general, like it helps in an academic kind of a setting to sharply talk about this is the definition of behavioral science. This is what it's supposed to do. This is the definition of social psychology, of behavioral economics, of market research, right? That is in a very theoretical setting, you can do that. Real life is not like that, bro, right? Real life, you come down, you're looking at people, whether you talk about their culture, ask them to tell a story, do a psych evaluation, do an experiment, all of it is leading to an answer, right? And the answers we are trying to seek is into insight of why they're doing something, number one. Number two, what do I do with this particular insight? You can either ask your client to make the brand sharper, you change the way the brand is being communicated. You can change the way the product has been designed, right? And I'm talking the physical, the UX, all of it, right? Or you can change the way the customer service around is designed. More or less, these are your three large buckets, right? The way, now I said sometimes it can differ. The reason I say that is sometimes, I'll give a small example, right? If you're going to look at from an ethno kind of a lens in a retail setting, right? And you see the way people are shopping. Oh, people are shopping, they're playing with kids, they like put the kids in the shopping carts, and they push it. Maybe you come up with an answer says, let's make the shopping cart more colorful. Right? Kids will come, people will play, right? It's going to be a good shopping experience for that. When you go in from a behavioral science lens, what you'll realize is, oh, wait a minute, push and pull, right? If I like something, I pull it to me. If I don't like something, I push it away from me.
It's more on a neuroscience level,
right?
Yeah.
See, again, because we are in the applied world, you can be very loose with definitions. I'll take 1 minute to explain this, right? Because you asked a very important question, Mukul. So we're very loose with definitions, and neuroscience also becomes a part of behavioral science for us. Thank God for that flexibility, right? So I push it, I don't like it. I pull it, I like it. Now, it's quite possible from one lens, your solution will make the color, the lens, colorful, kid-friendly. But from this lens, from a behavioral science lens, I want to tap into psychology. What I'll do is, I will design the shopping cart in such a way, when I'm holding the handle, I have to pull it towards me to move it.
Or I have to use the action that registers pulling rather than the action that registers pushing.
And now I'm tapping into the mind says, oh, I like this, I enjoy it. Are you seeing how the solution is totally different now in this case, right?
Yeah.
This is one part of it, Mukul. I have another point of view on this, right? Because even I started from qual research, and then I moved to this side of it. And I would say, so this is the way that I would want to answer the question. Behavioral science is a lens, right? Behavioral science is a lens, and it's a lens that you can use. You can use it to measure behavior. You can use it to measure. You don't use it to measure attitudes. You use it to measure behavior. And when you do that, simply because you've trained your lens on a new concept, you will get new insights. There is a difference between the two, because behavior science focuses on things that your consumer can't even tell you really. You cannot ask them those questions. They don't know that there is an answer there, right? And the usage of behavioral science for, rather the knowledge of behavioral science for the researcher helps them to design better DGs, helps them to understand their implications, the implications of their insights a little more sharper.
I hope that was helpful.
Yes. Now I'm going to just hand it over to Sundar, because I don't think we've left him any time. Yes.
Right. So I probably have a couple of observations to make, and probably one question. That's all we'll have time for before we head to wrap. Reshma, to the point you made, I think I've promptly forgotten the last 15 slides. I have no clue about what you guys spoke of, right? I mean, I'm just jesting. I have a general idea, but if you say, show me slide 2, 3, I have no idea, right? The other thing that I think I always knew, I always used to say I'm rational, but I've concluded after this session saying, my behavior of actually being rational is irrational, right? So it's like a conundrum, but I would say when somebody says they're rational, I think it's just that they don't know they're irrational, right? So
they're
I think
gassing around.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly, right? So I'm filling the gaps. I think that's some of the words that you use, right? So I'm just making up answers. I'm just making my brain respond and make me sound intelligent. So I'll have to be conscious and stop doing that, right? So I think that's my second big learning, right? The last question I have is related to the answer that both Prakash and Reshma you gave about the difference in between qual and the question that Mukul raised. What exactly is it? I mean, I thought we were always doing this. Is the response let's say it's my first response. I'm neither a qual researcher nor a behavior scientist. I'm just a simple data analyst, right? So I just know numbers. I can add them up and give you some answers, right? So the question is, how much is the human? How much is the tool? How much is the technique when I have to get to the right answer? Because this today we are saying machines can replace us. I don't believe it, but just for a moment, park that aside. When I'm saying I'm going to use the tool, I'm seeking answers as a marketer, as a problem solver, could be anything, right? How much of it is Prakash and Reshma? How much of it is all the nice slides you put up from professors and probably deep thinkers who have kind of articulated into a nice framework that we can use? That's really my question. So can I scale it, as a business?
See, 95% is a person, 95%.
Okay.
Right? It's not the camera, it's the photographer.
Okay.
So, and then the remaining is the knowledge of the field and your techniques around it, right? And if the person is not sorted, you can do a degree, this and that, PhD, all of that. It's not going to come out. It's not going to be actionable. You can't use it, right? But I mean, that quote by Ogilvy was a fantastic quote. How do you better articulate something like that? He was not. It's the person, right? If the person is sorted, they will get that insight, and we are definitely finding newer things today, like fMRI and implicit association testing and all of that. But
scaling, I think, is the that's really where I get where the question is coming from. Can it be scaled? Yes. Is it a permanent solution? No. If you look at it, if you book tickets, for instance, right? If you've just been booking tickets over the last few years, then you know that today people telling you that only 2 seats, only 2 of these rooms are left, or 500 people have been looking at this right now. It doesn't work on you anymore. So are the solutions scalable? The moment they come out, yes. But after some time, as you observe the science itself, is it scalable? How do you answer that question?
Right.
The implications of them, are they scalable? Yes, for a limited period of time.
If I change the question and if I take 10 seconds more, right?
So I'll just do a time out for Prakash and Reshma, right?
Already got it.
Wonders, yeah.
I'm kind of the timekeeper of thoughts. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not putting you guys out of business. So, I'm just going to kind of unequivocally call out saying it's very important that the person wielding this tool is sorted, Prakash, to borrow your phrase, right? Otherwise, we can go in all kinds of directions. And that, I think, is something that we all need to keep in mind. It's not just, the context of behavioral science. It's about anything that we do as insights professional, because we sometimes, I think both of you mentioned it in different ways. We are also driven by our biases and how we interpret things. There's only so much we can rationally compartmentalize and say this is who we are. But the way I'm reading the answer from both of you to my question is, the tools are there, the techniques definitely are there, but it's very important that the human wielding them, is a critical ingredient to the mix. And I think a related point, Reshma, you made was that what you find today might be, useful in driving a certain behavior here and now. But once we as people get used to that, we need to find new cues, new hooks that kind of make sure that the same behavior can be repeated, right? I think fair enough. So thank you very much, Prakash and Reshma, for taking time. We are just at the end. We started 5 minutes late. I'm just trying to wrap 5 minutes late. We stick to time. Generally, that's the behavior we follow. So thanks again. Thank you very much. Michaela, if you go to the next slide, please. I'll just announce the next session, and Mukul, you can wrap up after that. Sorry, one slide back. Yeah. So the webinar coming up on the 11th of January, Prakash and Reshma, we would like you to join in as well. It's about data protection and privacy law, and and that's going to be an act of parliament soon. So there's an expert panel coming together to kind of spotlight what that means to us, and it also might mean how much of our behavior you can actually go and measure, Prakash and Reshma. So we hope to see you there. We hope to see all the other audiences who joined in. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you put a lot of questions. You were very interactive. Unfortunately, Prakash and Reshma, you couldn't see the screen, but that's the limitation of the technology. To all the questions you posed, there were several responses, right? Okay. So maybe next time we plan a little better, so we make it a little more interactive. And there are several questions we probably haven't answered. So somebody from the MRSI office will reach out to you. You can type those responses, and we'll host it on our website along with the video recording of this session. Mukul, over to you.
Yes, I think with that we can definitely, I think, close. Thank you so much for your time, Prakash. Thank you so much for your time, Reshma. It's been.
Thank you for letting us influence your normally strict time behavior.
All right. All right.
Bangalore
Thank you.
traffic is always late, right? Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining. Bye.